G'day there guys, wife took the kids and now I'm sad. Back at it again with another episode of r/relationship advice. Now if you guys love today's content, please chuck a like on the video, sit back, relax, and chuck a prawn on the barbie for today's bloody amazing content. Posted by user ThrowRA Shoes. Titled, My 36 male, wife 34 female, keeps tying my boots after I've told her to keep her hands off them. I tried to teach her a lesson and really hurt her feelings. Yes, I know the title is bizarre and I can't believe I'm actually writing this. So, my wife is a neat freak. Always has been. She throws notes on my desk out, assuming they're garbage. My belongings get rearranged to the point where it takes me hours to find them. It's something I've come to accept. I'm not happy about it, but we have a pretty happy marriage on the whole. I am a volunteer EMT, and I keep my boots unlaced up against the wall next to my clothes hamper so that I can throw them on along with my uniform if a call comes in during the middle of the night. Well, my wife has taken to tying the bootlaces when she sees them untied. Not only does she tie them, but she tightens them and double knots them to the point where I need to undo the knots, open up the boots, and let a little slack out to fit my feet into them. I ignored it the first 2 times. But the third time she did it, I made a point to bring it up to her the next day. I very calmly said, "Hun, I appreciate that you want everything neat, but please do not touch my boots in the future. Time is of the essence when I'm on a call and at 2 in the morning, I don't have the time to unlace them and open them up. It's not just a minor inconvenience, it's people's lives, so I would appreciate it if you left them alone." She rolled her eyes, said I was being dramatic, and that she wouldn't help me out by keeping my things neat in the future. Well, she never stopped. No matter how many times I've asked her, told her, begged her, she just laughs and says, "Well, you know how I am." The other night, a page went out for a CPR in progress. I went to throw my boots on, and they were once again tightened beyond recognition. So I'm sitting there on the edge of the bed, cursing, trying to get my boots open, and fumbling due to the stress of the situation. My wife opened her eyes, groggily looked at me, and asked, "Don't you need to go on that call?" I know I was in the wrong here, and I regret it. I slammed the boots into the ground and yelled, "Yes, I do. I would have been out the door 5 minutes ago, except some stupid motherfrickers screwed with my goddamn boots again." My wife got up without another word, walked into the bathroom, and slammed the door. I got my boots open and went on the call. By the time we arrived, the police had gotten her back, so I didn't have to do CPR, but I was sweating and shaking, thinking my delay could have cost a life. I got home and my wife wasn't talking to me. She ignored me the entire day until we finally sat down and talked. She said I had scared her with how angry I got, that she thought I was going to hit her, and she didn't know I was capable of getting so angry. Note, I have never raised a hand to her, nor have I ever yelled at her before. I am absolutely not a violent person in any way, shape, or form. I apologized for yelling at her, and acknowledged that I hadn't meant to snap at her. I was frustrated with the situation, as I needed to get to the person in need of CPR as soon as possible, and it was a delay that didn't need to happen. I, once again, pleaded with her not to touch my boots because lives were literally on the line. She told me that if I was going to overreact and make her afraid, then she would never touch my boots again because she didn't want to live like that. Last night, before I got into bed, I had a sinking feeling, so I went over and checked my boots. I was very disappointed to find them tightened up again, so I decided to show her how it felt. I went over to her closet and pulled out her running shoes. I unlaced the shoes on both of them, removed them from the shoes completely, curled them each into a little coil, and put them inside the shoes, and put them back. I then went to sleep. At 6:15, I was woken up by my wife screaming, "How could you? Why would you do this?" holding up both laceless shoes with tears in her eyes. My wife likes to go for an early morning run, and I knew she would want to get out of the door as soon as possible. I smiled and said, "You know how I am. I just like things neat." She continued sobbing and walked out of the room. So by the time she was all laced up again, it was raining, so she missed out on her run. I actually feel pretty terrible about that, because I really only wanted to delay her, not ruin her plans completely. At this point, she's alternating between crying that I went out of my way to hurt her and ignoring my presence. I acknowledged that what I've done has been pretty childish and not at all constructive. I just don't know what to do. She said, through tears, "You admitted you were totally in the wrong for yelling at me, and then you turned around and took it out on me in a different way? What's wrong with you?" The problem is, to her, an apology means taking on 100% of the fault. When I apologized for blowing up, she took that to mean she was 100% in the right, and that my feelings were completely unjustified. So at this point, I haven't apologized for ruining her run, because she'll take that to mean she wasn't wrong to touch my boots. I've tried to have these discussions, but it's in one ear and out the other. We have such a good relationship otherwise, but I feel like this issue has reached a tipping point, and it's going to continue to result in arguments until we resolve it. How do I make things right with my wife whilst still letting her know that I won't tolerate her disrespecting my property anymore? Edit. Wow, this really blew up. I went through comments for 6 hours last night, and I still have 1.8 thousand to get through. I promise you I am reading every one of your comments and appreciate the advice. A couple of things to address, points that keep getting brought up. 1. My wife has never been diagnosed as having OCD. As an EMT, I'm very careful about labeling someone as having a disorder, as I don't have the proper qualifications to make that diagnosis. I do agree that it's time for her to see somebody, get a proper diagnosis, and address these issues. 2. My boots lace up in the front and zipper on the side. They're not a full unzip, rather an unzip to open them a bit. The way my wife is tying them makes them impossible to get on even with the zipper down. They are weatherproof and great for standing on rough terrain or on the highway after accidents. They're only about a year old and were actually a gift from my wife. I've not considered Velcro before. I'm a bit hesitant to do that, as I don't know that they wouldn't catch on things or wear out quicker. I've tucked the laces in, but she still tied them up. 3. This is a bit of a compulsive behavior on my part. I don't leave my boots in the garage because my mother was a smoker growing up, and that's where she would smoke. So I would end up with ashes in my shoes and having them reek of tobacco after. So I developed a habit of wearing them in my home. Also, if I leave them there, they are likely to get moved someplace safe, where it will take me even longer to find them. Putting the boots in the closet, she found them and tied them. Putting them under the bed or out of sight, they were found, tied, and moved to the closet. 4. I honestly believe that a footlocker or any other kind of box would get moved to where I would have to wake her up to find it. If it's locked, then my keys are likely to go missing. For some reason, sitting on my dresser is not appropriate, but in the pocket of a jacket downstairs in the closet is. 5. I am likely going to start putting my boots in the car, though I had to laugh at the people suggesting decoy boots. As much as it may seem like it, I'm not living in a spy versus spy cartoon. 6. I'm a volunteer EMT. We respond from home. We don't have sleeping quarters, and I work the overnight shift, so I sleep during my shift, get out of bed when a call comes in, drive to the building, and take the ambulance to the scene. This is typical of volunteer organizations. Paid EMS is more likely to have sleeping quarters or even require EMTs to be in the truck throughout their shift. Community-based EMS is more likely to take 911 calls and respond to emergencies, whether paid or volunteer. Private EMS is more likely to take transport requests, such as to and from dialysis or chemotherapy, as well as hospital to nursing facility discharges. 7. To those who have told me that I don't have the right to use the word life-saving, on my dress uniform, I have pins for 3 defibrillator saves and 4 for CPR saves. I've crawled into a car wreck to open someone's airway and bag them until we could get them out. While transporting a patient, I recognized signs of internal injury and ordered we divert to a trauma center, where he was put directly into emergency surgery that saved his life. Did I do these things entirely by myself? No, of course not. I would never claim that I was the sole reason that someone lived. However, I am, at my very basest level, a vital link in the chain of survival. So while I can't claim complete credit for any of the things I've done, I would certainly put a lot of the blame on myself if someone didn't live because of something I failed to do. 8. I have a full-time job that I work 8 to 5 Monday to Friday outside of EMS. That is why I volunteer on the night shift. My wife works as a payroll manager for a mid-sized office. I earn about $10,000 a year more than her. We've been married for 2 years. While I lived on my own before we were married, she didn't move into the apartment until we got engaged. So I think to her, that was my place, not ours, and she didn't really touch my things. I was with another EMS organization until we moved to a new town after our engagement. When we bought the house, I joined the local volunteer squad as an EMT. My wife regards my job as part of my identity, while she sees the EMS as something I volunteer to do. She would say, "This is my husband, he is job title," not, "This is my husband, he is an EMT." Tell your wife that this interference with your gear could crash your marriage and facilitate a death. And is she good with that, or will she work on herself? She thinks I'm being dramatic when I refer to life-saving, that what I do is more transporting boo-boos. Why does your wife not take what you do seriously? I'm sorry to say this, but she seems so out of touch and unempathetic if she thinks that being an EMT is just transporting boo-boos. I hope for your sake that she realizes soon that you do really important work by helping people, and that taking any extra time to reach someone may cost that person their life. Because not taking his job seriously enables her to shrug off any criticism and continue with her compulsive behavior. Bingo, ding ding ding. She needs to not take his job seriously so that she can avoid responsibility for her behavior. Ask your wife, if she got hit on her morning run, how would she like it if her doctor was late because his wife tied his shoes? I've actually made a similar argument. She laughed it off and minimized the work that I do. That most of what I do isn't life-saving, and taking the time to get dressed properly won't cost any lives. It's something that bothers me, but it's clear that she doesn't get it. In any first responder case, a lot of times they aren't big where it's life-threatening, but it's all about being prepared for the one. The fact she doesn't understand that, it's a yikes. As a first responder, you never let your guard down. 90% of your calls might be easy, small cases, but you still prepare and train as if your next one is going to be the other 10%. Don't understand why she still doesn't see this though. If she doesn't get this after being told multiple times, it's not a lack of understanding, it's a narcissistic lack of empathy. Narcissistic is right. In all of this, the only thing that affected her was how she was a victim by getting yelled at. Her getting yelled at and her shoes being the ones messed with. And even when she claimed that she would not tie the boots again, she made the statement about herself. She said that she won't do it because she can't live like that, not because she acknowledges what she did was wrong. And then goes and ties them again. Your wife's behavior sounds compulsive. She likely has a major anxiety disorder that manifests in this way, which explains her inability to stop herself from the rearranging and the lacing and whatnot. She needs therapy and medication pronto, but that doesn't explain her minimizing the importance and urgency of your job. Even if you weren't literally saving lives, I'd be ticked as hell if my partner trivialized my work and dismissed my need to be organized and prepared for my job. I'm skeptical that your marriage is truly as great as you say it is, and I'm concerned that you're just in the habit of subjugating your own needs to keep the peace due to your wife's quirks. Update: my wife keeps tying my boots after I've told her to keep her hands off them. I tried to teach her a lesson and really hurt her feelings. I've gotten a few requests for an update, but didn't want to post until I really felt like I had anything to say. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, so I'm going to try to go over it as best I can. My wife and I started talking again. We had a very serious conversation, and I did apologize for what I did to her running shoes, and then I told her that I had to speak some truth, and I wanted her to promise me that she wasn't going to roll her eyes, interrupt me, scoff, or get sarcastic with me, which she did. I told her that I was not kidding about my boots, that while most of the time I caught geriatric transports, falls, and nausea, there were instances where response time was of the essence, and I didn't have time to play around with my boots in the middle of the night. I told her that there have been times when my intervention has been critical in saving a life, when my training has helped me recognize an underlying emergency, or when a call I made ensured that a patient was prioritized upon arrival at the hospital. I explained that a lot of the crap that I see, I don't tell her about because I don't want to give her nightmares or make her worry about me. She actually listened and didn't dismiss what I had to say. She responded that she was trying to help by keeping things neat. I responded, "But you're not, sweetie. I'm not trying to be mean, but you're not helping. You're hindering me. One day, it may be the difference between life and death. I need you to not touch my gear. It's where I know it is. It's where I can easily find it in a short amount of time, and if you move it, you are impeding an emergency response. I don't care if it looks neat. It serves a function. It doesn't look pretty. If you want to help me, please leave my gear where I put it." A few nights later, I had my friend Officer Rich come over. Officer Rich was one of those 2 cops that did CPR on the victim that night. The 3 of us sat on our deck and had a few social distancing beers. He told me about getting there, doing CPR, giving Narcan, waiting for the ambulance, and getting her back shortly before we got there. He then pulled out a few photos of car accidents that I had worked. He showed them to my wife and pointed out, "This car went into a tree. Your husband crawled into the wreck, put a collar on the driver, and stayed in there giving him oxygen until we could get him out. Your husband pulled a 3-year-old out of this wreck. Your husband recognized that the driver had a stroke and took her to the stroke center, which likely saved her life." After that, I told her I had something I wanted to show her, and I asked her for the same promise that I'd asked earlier. When she agreed, I showed her a video on YouTube of a police body cam from an overdose. This video shows how critical time is in getting someone back, and the training someone goes through in order to give the drug, do CPR, and utilize an AED. I told her, "I'm not trying to attack you. I don't want to have a fight, but I want you to understand what I go through, that I hope every call I can go on is transporting a boo-boo, because otherwise it means that if I don't do everything right, someone could die. If I don't get out that door as quickly as possible, someone could suffer brain damage while they're waiting for me to give them oxygen. If I'm upset and shaking because I had to waste time opening my boots, I might miss something critical and someone might not make it." She acknowledged that she understood and told me she hadn't really thought about the danger of what I do until the other night when she saw the photos of the wrecks. I told her that I think she has OCD and needs to see a therapist, because it's hurting our marriage. I listed examples of her throwing important things out, moving things without permission, and messing with my gear. I offered to go together and said that I'd be willing to work on things together. After I pointed out the pattern, she agreed that it was time to speak to someone. She wants to think about whether she wants to go together or go by herself, but she has promised me that she's going to try to change her patterns. I brought up her saying she thought I was going to hit her, and she acknowledged she'd been with guys who flew off the handle with little provocation and scared her, that she'd never seen me that angry, and it triggered her because she didn't think I was capable of blowing up like that. She has been very emotional lately, and has been going through mood swings. She's been worried about me going out on calls. The other day she started crying and said, "I hope you know how much I appreciate what you do." Knock on wood, since we had the big talk, she hasn't touched my boots. Is everything resolved? Not by a long shot, but she seems to have a new appreciation for what I do. Thank you for all your responses. I wound up not showing her the thread because a lot of it was pretty harsh towards her. I recognize I cherry-picked incidents that didn't put her in the best light, and there is a lot more to her and our marriage than that. She is the person I chose for the rest of my life, and I want us to work. The last Basilope says, "I'm glad things have worked out so far, and I hope they continue to do so and that your wife gets the help she needs to be able to live more comfortably with her potential OCD, or whatever it turns out to be that drives her need for neatness." I was expecting it to end differently, maybe with her denying that she had OCD or that it was impacting their relationship and his job. Instead, good communication pulled through, and they're now on the same page. Truly so heartwarming to see another happy ending on this sub. My twisted mind was expecting after all of that, for it to end with him getting cold in the next day, and then his shoes are tied again. My twisted mind was afraid that would happen, and then someone would die, and he would blame himself and or her. OP, thanks for the update. Good luck. You seem open-minded and compassionate, and thank you for serving your community. It's got to be OCD. I say that as someone else who has it. When I was a kid, I would cry and throw tantrums if my socks weren't lined up with my feet properly. OP, for what it's worth, I had no idea I had OCD and that it wasn't normal until I started sitting in psych class one day watching a documentary on OCD. It took people describing their symptoms for me to have an epiphany and take a sweeping look around the dark classroom, only to crushingly realize nobody else had the same epiphany. That was when I knew something was wrong. So my point is that your wife probably had it for a very long time and never knew. She likely thought it was something everyone else dealt with too. That's probably part of where the mood swings come from, and it kind of both sucks and is liberating to find out you're not neurotypical. On the other hand, it sucks to know that you're different and dealing with something others may never understand. On the other, it's a relief to know that there is something you can pinpoint in terms of what is making you feel like an anxious wreck. I want to be clear that her treatment is not going to be an overnight thing. I know she said she would work on it, and I'm sure she will try, but trust me when I say it's probably a Herculean task for her to not tie your shoes. I realize how stupid that sounds. Everyone who has OCD deep down knows how stupid what they are doing is, but we cannot help it. That switch of confirmation when something gets done never gets flipped. For us, that sense of uncertainty and doom if we don't do something the right way or perform a ritual is always lingering. The only thing that helps with that is therapy and time, so you'll need to give her time. OCD never really goes away. We just learn better coping mechanisms to talk ourselves down from needing to perform our rituals. To be honest, I think you should straight up ask her why she felt the need to tie your boots every night. You explained it as her being a neat freak, but that's not how OCD works at its core. We do our rituals and compulsions because our obsessions make us feel like if we don't, the world may very well end. We know how stupid it sounds, but again, brain switches aren't wired right. So maybe try asking her again why it was she felt the need to tie your boots. And be sincere, and tell her you won't judge her if it turns out to be a really strange sounding reason. From my OCD head, I would probably do something like that because of my fear of you getting up at night, tripping over your laces, falling and cracking your head open, and dying before you could get to the hospital. Does that sound ridiculously dire? Welcome to OCD. But I have learned that sometimes certain things can help. Like when I lived with roommates, I would have them check things before bed and reassure me stuff was off, etc. Because in my head, if anything wasn't off, it was their fault rather than mine. Some other folks have described success with taking pictures so they can reassure themselves without checking the actual item, etc. So ask her, and you can maybe figure something out that will bring you peace and bring her relief. Maybe something like you turning your boots to face the wall and tucking the laces inside them, and reassuring her that the laces are put away. I don't know, just spitballing here. You don't need to fully understand OCD to sympathize and help your wife cope with it. Those of us with OCD don't fully understand it either because it feels like a curse nobody else takes seriously. And because of that, we go through a constant cycle of anxiety, trying to fix that anxiety with compulsions, then ridiculing ourselves for doing these rituals that we know are stupid as hell. And the cycle begins anew, viciously and without reprieve. Sorry to write a textbook, but without even reading your update and only reading the original post, I knew right away that she had OCD. Anyone who has an OCD meltdown can recognize the signs of it from a mile away. It's just one of these illnesses that people on the outside really don't recognize because they think it's all book organizational and hand-washing. But on the inside, those of us with it are trapped in our own endless feedback loops of anxiety, trying to fix that anxiety and failing and defeat. But there is hope in therapy, and I hope she responds well to it. You can do your part by coping with what she's going through. Surely there are some issues unique to you that she has helped you cope with. The relief she's going to feel when she finally starts to break those OCD chains that keep her doing things is probably going to be palpable for both of you. So please just do not ridicule her if she comes to you with stuff that sounds completely out of this world, and celebrate with her when she finally starts working through her therapy. Alright, and I think that's where we're going to leave today's episode, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed the content today. If you guys loved watching it as much as I loved making it, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel already if you haven't. Tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below, maybe like the video, who knows. I'd also like to take this time to thank my awesome Patreon and channel members. Without you guys, I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably be homeless on the streets of Ireland, crying, Irish dancing all over town. It would just be a mess. But no, for real, you guys are up on the screen now. Thank each and every one of you guys. And if you personally want to join the club yourself, there are links down in the description below. There's also the join button next to the subscribe button. Small monthly fee, but hey, it goes a long way to help me create more awesome content. Well, with that said, guys, I hope you do have a lovely day, night, sleep, evening, day at work, day at school, whatever you're up to. I hope you keep awesome today. You're looking amazing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.